So this is an Iran AI video from April 2025 showing an Iranian strike on Diego Garcia, the joint US-UK military base on Chagos Islands in the Indian Ocean. Now, 11 months later, Iran has shocked the world by attempting the strike for real. One missile experienced in-flight failure and the other was intercepted by a US Navy destroyer. Now, despite its failure, the attack itself changes the strategic consequences of this war. So, John, can you explain to us how they've changed?
When we think about wars and when we plan for wars, we tend to think in very distinct, exclusive theatres. So, for example, a Chinese war against the Taiwanese, we tend to think of it as taking place on Taiwan Straits. A conflict over the South China Sea will be in very distinct parts of Southeast Asia. What we should learn from this incident is that's actually not how war works. So let's say there were a war over the Taiwan Straits. The Americans rely on assets based not just in Guam, but also in Okinawa, in Philippines, and even my country, Australia. And in such a war situation, it is not unthinkable that the Chinese would strike assets as far away as Australia.
Tristan, some people have said, or questioned, is Diego Garcia like Taiwan's Guam? We're just showing now a map which shows the distance. It's within the range of the Iranian strike, whereas, of course, we know that China has much longer range missiles. And as John had mentioned, even Australia, Darwin, which is where the military base, US military, uses that base, is just over 4,000 kilometers. Is it a very stark reminder of, exactly how broad the battlefield will be?
Definitely. For example, we have Dongfeng 26, the missile from China, is dubbed as the Guam Express. So it means that they would definitely trying to use missiles or other elements to strike US bases around the Western Pacific. And if we take the February 2025 as an example, when the PLA naval fleet carry out a live fire drill or trying to carry out a live fire drill in southwestern Taiwan, they also sent a detachment to the sea between Australia and New Zealand to conduct their own exercise. So it means that if, in terms of operation, if China really want to launch attack on Taiwan, they will not just put their asset around Taiwan. They will also deploy their military elements around the Western Pacific to no matter deter or deny the United States intervention.
Okay, and John, what does that mean in terms of how Taiwan must change its planning?
The first thing Taiwan needs to do is make sure that it can survive an onslaught by the Chinese for more than a few weeks. Because if Taiwan can't survive an onslaught, then the Americans, the Japanese, or anyone else cannot assist the Taiwanese. Now, the Chinese have not really calculated for assets on its mainland to be attacked in such a war. And I'm not saying that Taiwanese are able to do that in any sustained way. But the Taiwanese should think about introducing some weapons in their arsenal that can hit significant mainland targets, because that just complicates the defense, but also strategic planning for the Chinese. And remember as well that the Chinese Communist Party, they have their own domestic pressures. Their elites in mainland China do not really want to see their lives greatly disrupted either over an action against the Taiwanese. So not just Taiwan, but Taiwan should think about having assets that can hit significant targets on the mainland, if indeed they're under an existential threat, which they would be if they were invaded by a PLA.
So you're saying greater counteroffensive, that Taiwan would have to hold out for longer, because you said that Taiwan needs to hold out until those US troops come in. But if those US troops are military is being attacked in Guam or Darwin, then Taiwan might need to hold out even longer.
Most of the Chinese firepower would be focused on Taiwan. So it's in Taiwan's interest to hold on as long as possible, but also to acquire some longer range offensive weapons that would cause the Chinese to consider whether it's really worth taking that military option.
And Tristan, very final question. Cluster bombs were used by Iran, as they have been used by Russia in the Ukraine war. What sort of damage does that pose to Taiwan if China was to use them?
So it would definitely cause a lot of problem in terms of Taiwan's military and infrastructure, because China did not sign the Convention of Cluster Munitions. So it probably implies that they have a lot of this kind of munitions. And of course, we know that Taiwan has a strong air defense system around Taiwan, but definitely it would not be sufficient to deny or to destroy every cluster munitions that China trying to drop on Taiwan. So what Taiwan could do would definitely just as President Lai Ching trying to do is the whole society defense resilience to ensure that even though probably infrastructure is being damaged or destroyed, but the daily life of Taiwanese people can carry on, so the will to fight will not be seriously decreased.